Okay, so we are recording. I would now like to pass things off to Lorien Castell, our Director of Prevention, to kick things off.
Thank you so much, Keegan. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I have to say that we're really excited to be able to share some new resources with you that have been under development here at NYSCADV. And this is really just the first of several conversations that we will be having for the remainder of the year and to start off our new year in 2022. I can't believe I just used 2022 as a benchmark. And so we're really interested in your feedback. We're sort of considering this a soft launch in terms of sharing these resources with you. We'll be telling you how to access them. And we're interested in your input about, would you use them? How would you use them? Would you need to adapt them for local context to make them more community specific? So this is really, they're ready and they're ready to go, but this is really an opportunity for us to share with you what we've been working on. So, and I also want to thank, Jennifer Clark, who's been doing a tremendous amount of work helping get these resources looking pretty and polished. And then my comrade here, Russ Funk, who is our consultant for all things engaging men related these days, and has been working with us for over a year on developing resources and materials and an approach to not just engaging men, but specifically engaging dads. So what we'll be sharing with you today really has to do with our Because We're Dads initiative. And we'll be sharing some information about parent engagement in general, but really focusing in on dads and male caregivers. We're going to do, Russ will handle providing an overview of the Back to School Toolkit, which we will also share with you how to access that. It's on our website. It's downloadable. Some of the other Because We're Dads resources that we've been developing. I will be sharing with you an overview of some sample conversation starters for parents and other caregivers. They're also appropriate for counselors and coaches and teachers and school nurses. So lots of really good information in there. And then we'll be talking a little bit about what's next. So as always, whenever we're developing a resource, we really want to check in with the group, the population that it's meant to support. And so we're checking in with parents, we're checking in with young people, we're launching a youth advisory council that will also be comprised of middle school and high school students in one group, and then college age young adults in another group to give us some feedback about what they want for their parents and their grown-ups, the adult influencers in their lives to know about relationships and the kind of support that they want and need. So we'll be doing all of that, which is really exciting. And I would say consider this a little bit of a sample of some of the information that we share with parents when we're providing parent engagement. And why they should care, what we know about teens and dating, healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships from all of the research that's been emerging for the past 30 years, and how we can sort of capture the attention of parents. So here's just a little sample of how we sort of start off when we're doing that. We want for parents to know that 20% of young people between the ages of 11 and 14 say their friends are victims of dating violence. So there are a lot of parents out there who still believe that their 14-year-olds are not dating, and maybe they call it something different, but that's a pretty high number. Even higher is that 40% of young people who were surveyed, and of course this is self-report, between the ages, those same ages, talk about how they've known people who have been verbally abused. And so we know that when you add verbal abuse and sexual assault and sexual coercion and reproductive coercion to the statistics around adolescent relationship abuse, that the numbers really double, triple, sometimes quadruple. And that 34% of young people that are sexually active by age 15 report having been physically abused. So the numbers are really kind of daunting. And they can be quite a wake-up call for middle schools and for administration at middle schools who don't believe that folks like us should be coming in and engaging students around healthy relationships. You know, these young people are already in relationships where they're being abused, they're perpetrating abusive behavior, or they're seeing their friends go through it. In terms of LGBTQ youth, multiple studies that have emerged over the past 5 or 10 years talk about how transgender and non-binary youth experience sexual violence really at some point in their lives, but it's nearly double what it is for cisgender and heterosexual youth. So 1 in 3 girls, we believe, is posited from the research, and 1 in 6 boys, cisgender boys, have reported being a victim of sexual abuse, sexual violence, or sexual coercion. So these rates are definitely something that we want to be looking at. In terms of LGBTQ youth and dating, 25% of youth have reported experiencing psychological abuse or physical dating violence. And so really LGBTQ youth sort of experience their higher shares of victimization than what we see in cisgender and heterosexual, so again, self-reported kids who are talking about the rates of violence that they've either seen, that they've witnessed, or that they've experienced. So we've got cyber dating, it's up there. I'm not going to read the slide to you. We've got physical dating violence, 43% compared to 29% in a heterosexual youth population. And so much of this is also from New York. It's from GLSEN, which does a school climate survey. There are statistics for all over the country. We're very happy to have New York State pertinent data, but anywhere you are in the country, there is likely data that can help us sort of figure out what the magnitude and the prevalence is. And this is what we want to communicate to parents and to the adults who have youth in their sphere of influence. With psychological dating, look at that, 59%. Compared to 46%, and then sexual coercion really, almost double. So we want to make sure that we're talking about this, that we're normalizing talking about this, and that you put this in front of the people who are doing a lot of modeling and a lot of training up of young people, whether it's children, their own children, whether they're caregivers to children, whether they're coaches or counselors, like I've said. So the other thing too is that there are severe consequences. The context and consequences, you'll see, I always say context matters, and what consequences are for different groups is really something we want to focus on. So young people who are being abused report higher rates of using cigarettes, tobacco, drugs, and alcohol use, engaging in unhealthy eating behaviors, sometimes eating disorders, engaging in risky sexual behaviors, and have attempted or consider suicide. So suicidal ideation we'll talk about a little bit later. Again, very, very high for young people who are in relationships where they're being victimized. And I have that asterisk up there because I hate to use the word that they're participating in risky sexual behaviors, because actually the use of drugs and alcohol, behaviors, relationship with food, relationships with their bodies, and what we call risky sexual behaviors of youth are often very much tied to the abuse. So I just wanted to kind of underscore that. So the factors that may contribute, as we all know, because we're all prevention preventionists, prevention educators on the line, or we have some interest in doing this work, or we're working with youth all the time, we're out in our communities. Obviously, we're going to be talking about social norms that permit dating violence, dating abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, all gender-based violence, the norms that accept that and allow it to thrive in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in our workplaces, in our schools. And so it's really about unlearning those social norms if they've already learned them, and promoting behaviors that we want for young people to adopt. So having friends who are being abused or who are abusive can also be a factor that contributes. A climate really matters. Environment really matters. Exposure to violence in one's own family, and then of course, exposure to violence in the community. All of these, the research shows us year in and year out, are factors that contribute to adolescent relationship abuse. Here's why we're talking about parents, because all of those same studies that are promoting a variety of protective factors that would stop perpetration from happening in the first place, that would prevent victimization, we hope, posits that young people who have really strong connections with their parents or caregivers, and also connected to the community. They know the community's looking out for them. They've got family members looking out for them. We know from the research that this is a protective factor, and that they're more likely to have healthier relationships with peers and in dating relationships if they've got those kinds of relationships established. And so that's the hook. And there are more hooks, and we're really eager to hear from you about what your approach has been in terms of engaging parents, your successes, your challenges. I can share a little bit with you what other folks in New York are doing, what people all over the country are doing, but we really want to hear from prevention programs here in New York State so that we can, those of you who are having successes, we can elevate those successes and share them with your prevention colleagues and peers, and work through some of the challenges that you're experiencing, because we know it was challenging before COVID, engaging parents, getting them to show up, getting them to care about the issue, you know, considering all of the other stressors and challenges that people were experiencing day to day. But now we've heard from many of you that it's even more challenging. So that's the hook. And now I'm going to turn it over to the wonderful Russ Funk, who's going to tell us why we're focusing on dads. But you got to unmute, Russ.
Yes, that would help, wouldn't it? So
that
sorry.
would so help. Thank you.
So thank you, Lorien. I am always so happy to work with you all at NYSCADV and you all across the state. I love what New Yorkers are doing around this issue, and it's a real honor for me to be contributing in the way that I can. As Lorien said, I'm a consultant and activist based in Kentucky. That may have relevance here in a little bit, but really working on with you all around the notion of engaging dads in particular. And one of the reasons we started this, at least locally, was because for several years now, we've had particular focus during Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month in February of reaching out to dads locally in terms of what they can do. And one of the things that we hear consistently from the dads that we pull in, either through our fathers panels or some of the other programming that we've done, is that dads tend not to think about dating violence so much. The only level that they tend to think about dating violence is protecting their daughters, maybe to some degree protecting their sons, but there isn't a lot of awareness that, you know, the risk to another teenager's daughter is the risk to some teenager is somebody's son. That very few dads are considering, ooh, what is my role in terms of raising my son to be the kind of man who doesn't perpetrate dating violence? And so that kind of started my thinking around this, and then talking with Lorien around helping develop this capacity for you all. And one of the things that we found here locally in our work, and has been also kind of demonstrated nationally, is that, the other reason that we're focusing on dads is that if I look at most of the materials that are designed for parents, It may say parents, but it's coded for moms. And part of that is because of the way that we tend to provide materials around dating violence for parents. There tends to be a bias that we have as a movement thinking about moms. And part of it is that that's kind of the bias in our society. We live in a sexist world, and most of us still think most of our social expectations are still that the parent who deals with issues of dating, issues of sex, issues of relationships, it is still mom's job. And so really doubling down on what are the specific tools and the specific resources for fathers seems like an important add. I'm not going to read the slide. You can read that as well as I can. I think it's important to note that is, to use Lorien's word earlier, the hook is that dads do want their children to be in safe, healthy, respectful dating relationships, and that dads have a role to play. And I think connecting with the fact that, as the last point makes, the dads do care. This is why dads care, and then giving them the information and resources around how can they actualize that care in terms of making their children more likely to be able to engage in equitable and respectful relationships. Next slide. Lorien, okay. Oops, I think we missed one. Oh, okay, sorry. Jumped right to the Back to School Toolkit. Okay, so the Back to School Toolkit was developed in 2020. It highlights the roles of dads in supporting youth in flirting and dating with respect. The toolkit is designed, it's kind of designed for two audiences. It's designed for you to share with the dads that you're working with, and it's designed for dads in specific. The focus of the toolkit is on those transition points in terms of middle school to high school, elementary school to middle school or junior high school, middle or junior high school to high school, and then high school to college. Because those transition points create opportunities. As a parent myself, my child just entered middle school this year in 2021. Preparing for those transitions provides some open doors for those of you who are parents. Those of you who work with parents will know there's a different kind of anxiety, there's different kinds of excitement, there's a different kinds of nervousness around moving to that next level of school. That provides an opportunity for the conversation. In that conversation around going from one level of school to the next, in that overall conversation, is an opportunity to talk about flirting and dating. As it says, the slide says, these transition points provide an opportunity to focus the conversations. Okay, next slide. Oh, okay. And the toolkit and the frame for this campaign, for this initiative, is this gender equitable framework. And the premise of a gender equitable framework is that all human beings are constrained and limited by traditional gender norms. And boys and men, particularly cis boys and men, is also experienced and are granted privileges and entitlements based on these same gender norms. I think that's a critical piece to add in our conversation with cisgender kids, that those privileges and entitlements are a part of their experience. And if we only focus on the limitations, if we only focus on the ways that our humanity is constrained by traditional gender norms when we're talking with youth, then we inadvertently reinforce the privileges and the entitlements, because they don't become explicated, and we don't have an opportunity to critique them and walk young men through them. Because of that unique position, boys and men have a unique opportunity and responsibility to work for gender equity and gender justice. That's kind of the framework for the gender equitable framework that we're operating this out of. We try to translate it and apply specifically to this initiative and the toolkit overall. All right, next slide, we'll see where we're at. So there's some things around flirting and dating that I know with my kid. I knew this kind of conceptually, but now that my child has entered the tween years and is starting to think about this a little bit, although he'll still deny it, but starting to talk with youth about the expectations of flirting and dating. Flirting is fun, but it is also kind of scary, both when you are flirting with somebody and when you are responding to somebody who's flirting with you. We tend to carry I don't know what the word is, a bunch of baggage, for lack of a better word, of expectations attached to our flirting. And what is it that we, and I don't know that we do a good job of teaching our kids to pay attention to what are their expectations that are attached when they're flirting with somebody. So making those aware, making that acknowledgement, and then bringing it to the surface so that children know what their expectations are, so that youth know what their expectations are, and then they can have a conversation around whether or not these expectations are realistic, if these expectations are fair, and what happens if those expectations aren't met. Offering some guidance of how to flirt and how to respond to flirting. Again, this is kind of embedded in the toolkit. And then helping youth distinguish between flirting and harassment on both sides of that, not only on the receiving side, which I think most youth kind of inherently understand the difference. They kind of feel it, the difference between somebody who's flirting with them and trying to be respectful and someone who's harassing them and just trying to get a reaction or be abusive and hurtful. And it's important for us to have conversations with youth and prepare parents and dads to have conversations with their kids around how do you know the difference between flirting with somebody and harassing somebody. This is all some of the content that we bury into the toolkit. All right, next slide. And one of the things that we talk really clearly about in the toolkit is this notion of setting boundaries. As you all know, setting boundaries is a critical part of any kind of flirting and dating conversation, any kind of conversation around equitable and respectful relationships and relating. And it's important to acknowledge that boundaries are more like bubbles than walls. I know one of the curriculum that I'm working under right now kind of encourages youth to know beforehand and set your boundary ahead of time. And it doesn't really acknowledge that sometimes our boundaries shift in real time. Sometimes we adjust them in real time. Sometimes I think I know what my boundary is or should be, and then I'm in the relationship or I'm in the moment and it's like, oh, this is kind of shifting right now. And how do we negotiate that? And how do we empower our kids to negotiate that? So part of it is knowing what helping dads to help kids to know what their boundaries are and how to set them with others. And how do they recognize the boundaries of others and respect those boundaries? One of the things that I talk with youth a lot about is sometimes in life, we may have an idea of a boundary, but very often our life experience, and I think you'll know this is true in your own lives if you reflect back, very often you recognize the boundary after you crossed it. The example I like to use is the first time that I was kissing a girl. I think I was in either 7th or 8th grade or 9th grade, somewhere in that range. The first time I kissed a girl, she put her tongue in my mouth. Violated my boundary. Can I just tell you? I thought it was gross. I wasn't sure what she was doing. I wanted her to get the tongue out of my mouth, but I had no idea how to say that and stay cool, right? My assumption was if I said, please take your tongue out of my mouth, but I want to keep kissing you. My assumption was not only would she reject me, but that would go around school in a minute and I would never get a date again. So I just kind of put up with it. Now, I'm not suggesting that I was assaulted in any way. That's not my story. My story is that the boundaries shift. And sometimes we don't know what our boundary is until something happens. And so talking with youth around how do you recognize when your boundary has been crossed and, oh, wait, that was my boundary back a minute ago, and then negotiate resetting the boundary. That should be part of the norm, right? That happens frequently. That I think I'm okay with doing something and I try and it's like, you know what? Not really feeling it. Part of our toolkit and part of our conversation with dads for the purpose of the toolkit, and I think for you all with parents in general, is how do we create an environment where kids can know that it's okay, especially during adolescence, when their job is to start testing their boundaries. How do we let them know that they can reset the boundary even after they've crossed it? And how do we let adolescents know that if their partner resets the boundary, their job is to respect it? I thought you were down with that and you changed your mind. Bummer. But I'm going to respect that and reset my boundary based on what you're comfortable with, even though I thought we were on the same page. And there's a critical role for fathers to be part of this conversation, both in terms of modeling it with their children and in terms of engaging in the conversation, because modeling isn't good enough. I think that's one of if there's one lesson I want to offer you all to offer your dads, modeling is not good enough, because kids aren't getting what they need in terms of the concrete lessons and concrete skills. They don't get that from modeling any more than, to use a sports analogy, any more that you can learn how to throw a baseball by modeling, right? The only way to know how to throw a baseball is to get out there and practice throwing a baseball. Same thing here. And dads have a role to play in helping our young people understand how do you set boundaries, how do you respect boundaries, and how do you renegotiate boundaries after they've been crossed and you want to reset those boundary lines. Next slide. So as I said earlier, the toolkit is really designed around these transitions from different levels of schooling. And the kind of the message between them and what we know from data is that flirting and dating in middle school or junior high school is different than flirting and dating in elementary school. And flirting and dating in high school is different than flirting and dating in middle and junior high school. And flirting and dating in college is different than flirting and dating in high school. So as kids are going through these natural transitions and going kind of through that process of thinking about, oh, what's life going to be like in middle school? This is a new opportunity as I go into high school. I can kind of redefine myself. I don't know that I liked who I was in middle school. I get to be a new person. I have a niece who changed her name from elementary school to middle school, as an example. So I think, again, in the midst of all that conversation, you can talk is a ripe opportunity for dads, parents, to talk with their kids around what does it mean around how flirting and dating is going to look different. And then prepare them for that with real concrete. We try to be really concrete tools, concrete suggestions around the kind of conversation to have with your child and how to have those kinds of conversations and the resources to give your kid to help make them be ready and available. All right, next slide. Oh, okay. Next slide. So, as I said, one of the kind of grounding points is this notion of, so we define healthy relationships in the toolkit as equitable and respectful. This may be where my background in the South, I grew up in Texas, started doing this work in Texas. I now do this work in Kentucky. One of the things that I struggle with in terms of using the language of healthy relationships is that different people define healthy differently. And there are patriarchs who define healthy as she listens to me and she doesn't talk back. And so I think it's important for us when we're, at least in the Kentucky context, when we're talking about what we mean by healthy relationships, that we define it explicitly. And what we mean by healthy relationships are relationships that were equitable and respectful. And talking with kids around how do you flirt with equity and respect as your basis? How do you respond to flirting with equity and respect as your basis? If that's your foundation of how you want to treat other people and how you want to be treated, then it influences both how you flirt and how you respond to being flirted with. That's part of the content that we add into the Back to School Toolkit. Again, working really hard to make these concrete and expressible with the dads that you'll be working with. All right. So in the toolkit, we provide an overview of the flirting and dating dynamics at each stage. We talk a little bit about the overall transition that I mentioned earlier that kids are going through. And then we offer dads specific recommendations for how to talk with their sons, their daughters, and their genderqueer kids. Those recommendations are kind of specified, and we run the risk of reinforcing kind of these gender categories as if they are three separate categories. We acknowledge that that's a risk. I think if you look at the toolkit, you notice that there are some recommendations that flow between all three. And there are some recommendations that are specific to the gender expression or the gender identity of the child that the parents working, that the father is with. But those recommendations were meant to kind of give parents, in this case, give dads, a really specific and concrete kind of notion of how do I engage in this conversation. All right, I just threw a whole lot at you all. I hope it was somewhat coherent. Any questions, comments, criticisms?
Don't be shy, folks. Reactions. Concern.
Including, based on what I've said, including on things that I've missed or that we've missed that we need to find a way to integrate or include as we keep working.
Exactly. And you are able to unmute yourselves, I believe. You can raise a hand. We're just going to stop here for a minute, let you gather your thoughts. I know some of you really well in this meeting. Don't make me call on you.
Hi there, Lorien. I just want to thank you, Russ, for that great exploration of this topic, which is so valuable. I want to share that just yesterday we were working with a group of our teens on our Teen Leadership Council, and that topic of how do you set a boundary after the boundary's already been crossed was front and center. And I think it's, we've done a lot of focus on setting the boundary ahead of time. And like you said, I like that image of the bubble. It's not always easy to kind of, and that's the hard conversation, and the one where you have to have both people, one willing to say so and the other person receptive to hearing that not in a defensive mode. So just want to share that.
Thank you.
And I think, to me, this is one of those areas where the limitations and the privileges of our gender norms become most clear, because once a boundary is set, then the way we raise our, at least sexually and relationally, we raise our boys to then attach expectations to that new boundary. All right, here's the boundary. She let me put my tongue in her mouth or whatever. And now there's an expectation attached, and we don't do a good job. We do not do a good job with our sons of raising them to pay attention to the fact that, ooh, I have an expectation to this. And maybe that expectation isn't fair. Maybe that expectation isn't realistic or reasonable. And in addition, whose expectation is it? And if that expectation isn't met, whose disappointment is it? So in addition to not talking with our children and our sons in particular around the expectations they have that attach when a boundary gets set, but also the fact that very often the message that our sons get is that if I have an expectation with my girlfriend or boyfriend and that expectation isn't met, then they are responsible for my disappointment. Instead of engage in a conversation with our sons around, maybe at least part of my disappointment is my responsibility, not my partner's. I don't know if we do a good job with that with daughters. I don't have a daughter. I've never been a daughter. I don't know that. My professional experience has been working with sons. So that may also be true with our daughters or our genderqueer kids, but I know it's the case with our sons. And I think that may be something to actually, Lorien, I'm tracking that. Maybe that's something to add as we go further. How do we have this conversation? How do we encourage dads to have this conversation with their sons or their children around how do you pay attention to the expectations that you have when you're flirting and dating? And then whose responsibility is the disappointment? Is the disappointment if your expectations aren't met?
I love that. And I'm eager to hear from others. And so I've jotted it down too. One of the things that I was tracking from this conversation was how closely, now when I show you the sample conversation starters, you'll see that we've couched things as boundaries, personal boundaries. And we got some feedback that parents of younger people who are more in the sort of 10, 11, 12, 13 range are really uncomfortable with talking about consent, because talking about consent at that age, even though we have put forth this notion that you can be talking about consent and personal boundaries and that they're really inextricably linked. And we can do that from the time that a baby is born, right? When they're toddlers and everybody wants to smooch them and give them big hugs and tickle them, and maybe they don't want to be. and good touch, bad touch, and hands are not for hitting, and all of those things that we've been doing all along really translate very nicely to this notion of having personal boundaries, right? And being able to communicate them even from a very young age. But I've spoken to some parents who say, you know, it's okay for high school, it's okay for college. I'm really not willing to have a conversation about consent, which often draws the straight line to, behaviors that I'm not sure that I want my children to be engaging in, sexual behaviors, physical behaviors. So can we just keep it to boundaries? So we're really struggling with that, about whether or not, you know, this introducing this sort of concept of consent is something that should go in these sample conversation starters. So I'm tracking that too, because I think I want to check in with more of you, prevention educators, more parents, and also I think it's going to be key to talk to young people themselves and to find out what kind of support they want, again, from their parents and caregivers and other trusted adults around this notion of personal boundaries. And it's making me think a lot about our Coaching Boys into Men work, which is we talk a lot about boundaries with coaches, because we talk about behavior on the field and behavior off the field, and aggression and assertiveness and power on the field versus off the field. And so there might be a link there, some kind of approach that we can connect. Anybody else have a comment or a reaction that you would like to share? Okay.
Well, there's one in the chat. How do we
Oh,
broach
good.
this subject for responding to a fallout of consent of expectations? Consent is key to a relationship. However, not everyone may not agree at the time or push for more. So I'm not quite sure I am getting the question.
Jennifer, are you comfortable unmuting and sharing with us what you're thinking about?
Yeah, sorry, I was hoping to convey in text. When approaching like parents or others that feel uncomfortable talking to their kids about their relationships with dating or even flirting, or even just their regular friendships, each friendship requires some boundary set. And I was wondering if the person on the other end of that boundary, if they disagree with it or want to push for a different outcome and neither party agrees. I'm trying to
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about scenarios, and I know that many of you like using different scenarios for having these hard conversations. You know, I know that we do that with, you know, in trainings, in meetings, and you know, all of the groups that we convene. And I think it's important when parents aren't quite seeing it, you know, to have some scenarios available that, and Jennifer, to your point, that are beyond romantic relationships, dating, or whatever they're calling it, and that can go into friendships, because parents have seen friendships where boundaries have been, you know, not respected. You know, when somebody expects you to not share your secrets and they're shared, you know, that could be something that's, you know, has a lot to do around trust. And so all of this is really linked. And, you know, I think it would be great to be able to engage parents and the young people that you're engaging too, with having some tried and true scenarios where we might be able to get them to sort of see, you know, how all of this is linked: boundaries, trust, consent. And I have, you know, just working with some middle schools that are really uncomfortable with the term consent. I feel like they had a lot of success talking to their middle school boys, was all boys school, just using boundaries, because the concept of consent kind of comes up without it being so on the nose.
Right.
Correct.
If I can use, so when Kieran was in, my son, when he was in just entering fourth grade, he had a situation kind of that I think relates, Jennifer, to what you're talking about. So he had, a kid that he was hanging out with pretty much all of the summer. Simon was at our house all of the time. He and I, the three of us, did outings together all summer long. They've been friends through most of third grade, all summer long. And then something happened in fourth grade and Simon switched up. And it would have been a really great opportunity to talk with kids around, for lack of a better word, how do you break up? How do you end a friendship without going mean? And the only way Simon knew how to break up this relationship was to flip it and become just a bully towards Kieran. And the only way Kieran knew how to respond was to start bullying back. Because that's what they're taught at third grade, right? They don't know, they haven't been taught yet. How do you break up in a respectful way? And it was a great opportunity for us to lean in with Kieran around using that as a learning opportunity. You don't have to get mean. No one expects, maybe you do at third grade, but most of us who are adults don't expect a third grade friendship to last forever. It probably is going to end. Most of the time, it just kind of devolves and dissipates, right? But sometimes people feel like when it's breaking up, the only way I can justify breaking up with you is if I make an enemy out of you, right? And destroy the relationship. So that was a great opportunity to kind of lean in. And again, not using the consent language, not even using the boundary language, just talking about sometimes friendships run their course. And that's a great opportunity to talk about, that's okay, we had a good time together, we enjoyed each other, and now we just need to go our separate ways and not get mean in that context. I hope that was a learning experience that Kieran can hold and translate when he starts dating and then he does break up with somebody or they break up with him. But I think that's kind of getting at what you're saying. I'm a little unclear if your question is around when the people who are in the relationship don't agree on the consent or the boundaries, or if the parents don't agree, and how do you as a preventionist, how do you engage the parent?
You have made both good points on that. Because I know not always, the parents don't always agree with the kids either. And
or us, right? Or us.
Yes.
Right.
And so it's almost like a power struggle between the three.
Right. And I'm always real clear with parents because I'm really clear. I believe that parents very well may not agree with how I am framing relationships, how I am framing healthy. It's not my job to teach values. That's your job. And I want that kind of respect. As a parent, I want that kind of respect. I don't want you teaching my child your values. Thank you very much. I want you to provide my child information and knowledge and skills, and then apply that information, knowledge, and skills to the values that I teach my kid. So I'm really clear and transparent with parents that I'm not trying to teach values. That's kind of a gray area because frankly, between us, yeah, I sort of am. And my focus is much more on information, knowledge, and skills around how they maneuver dating, however they define their datingness. And I find that helps soften the relationship or the power, as you suggest, that power struggle that may occur with parents.
And I think as prevention educators, I've seen so many of you be so skilled at not imposing values, but rather allowing them to emerge from the group and facilitating a conversation about what individual values are being held, right? And so, I mean, that may be a part of it as well. It's not necessarily what's going to get us in the door with schools that don't want us there. So I'm really curious about how all of that is going for folks. Particularly in elementary school or middle school, NYSCADV has really drawn a line in the sand around a mandate for policy that would be statewide, that all schools in the public school system from K through 12 have a policy to respond to gender-based violence when it comes to the school's attention, and also curriculum that would be age appropriate. And we've really said, you've got to do the earlier grades too. We can't just assume, by the time we do it, as I've said, many of you who know me know that I say this too much, but if we wait to talk about consent and boundaries until college, we're too late, because relationship norms have already been established at that point. But we can teach about having healthy relationships, which is what Jay is saying here. And so Jay, I wanted to, because I'm going to be sharing some of the conversation starters with you. And I want you to know that, what you're saying about relating it to all relationships, that's in the back to school toolkit that Russ just talked about. Sort of talking about how it's friendships as well. This is not just about romantic or physical relationships. It's relationships with friends, it's relationships with family, it's all of that. It's how we are in the world and how we're moving through the world. So I really do appreciate that. And beyond sort of the parent conversation starters, the prompts that we're suggesting, or that we're sort of offering up, is also, what about friendships, or what about upstander behavior when you just see that something's going on that's not okay? How do you be an ally to a friend or a fellow student or somebody in the community when you see that they're being discriminated against? And they may not even be a friend, but what do you do to stand up for what's right, in terms of being an ally and being an upstander? And that's going to take a little bit more massaging, because the information to educate parents around teen dating violence and what healthy relationships look like is one sort of set. I mean, there's a container for that, and there's a set of materials, but the stuff around anti-oppression and homophobia, transphobia, racism, classism, it's a differently curated set of resources that we want for parents to have, and yet we don't want to overwhelm them, right? So Jay, I'm really interested in talking more about that. I'd love for you and anybody who's interested to sort of see what the resources are that we're looking at to educate parents. And what else do we need? And how much is enough? How much is too much? Go ahead. Yes, please.
And just to bounce off that, Jay, if I can be so informal with you, I appreciate you holding that up. And the research is really clear. The way the current kids learn how to flirt and date is how they start interacting with each other in second, third, fourth grade, right? It starts kind of testing those notions, even though they don't know they're testing those notions. Whatever lessons they learn from them, that's what translates into how they start flirting and dating when they get into middle school. More than watching how I flirt with my partner in front of Kieran, right? It's his lived experience of hanging out with his friends and tickling each other. And then when someone says, I've had enough tickling, or I don't want to be tickled, how does he respond, right? That's where those lessons get learned. Particularly for our gay kids, they start with playing with each other, and then those other kind of feelings get attached to them, and then we, the old people in the room, start attaching different meaning to them. So I think that contextualizing of it, I think, as Lorien, as you were talking, it seems like that may be a way to start pushing back against the pushback that sometimes we get from parents of younger kids around talking about consent and dating, is talking with them around, well, how do we teach them, support them when they're in first, second, third, fourth grade, around how do you interact with each other, and how do you, when you are in your wrestling matches, or when you are in your tickling fights or whatever, how are you also paying attention to boundaries? Because I guarantee you, those kids are setting boundaries in those moments. And when they're not listened to then, or when one of the kids decides that they don't have to pay attention to the boundary, when the kids keep saying, okay, stop, I've had enough, please stop tickling me, those lessons carry over in a whole different way than what I or you are teaching these kids, either my child here at home or the kids that you all are interacting with through your schools.
Yeah. And so, understanding what stop means, understanding what no means, I would also say that, it's really what we're talking about is, one of the things we talk about all the time, which is for those younger age groups, preschool and whatnot, it's, how are you being, it's stepping up to be a good friend. How are you being a good friend? Are you being a good listener? Catherine, I see your hand up. Are you being a good friend? Are you sharing? When you see that somebody is struggling, are you helping them? You know, how it's sort of like how to get caught doing something good and positive and helpful rather than being afraid that you're getting caught doing something that's not. Right. And really reinforcing all of that, all the grown-ups in the area reinforcing when they're catching children do that, because that's relationship building. Those are skill building that they will carry into their romantic, physical, intimate relationships. Catherine, please unmute and go ahead.
Hi, nice to see you. I wanted to say I had like 2 comments based off what we were just sharing, and also wanted to just say thank you for this specific toolkit and just all of this work, because we've done a few parents talks at my sister's place, and we only did one the beginning of COVID, and we haven't done any since. But a lot of times it's moms who come and female identified parents. And so it's just really great to have something that's also engaging dads and male identified people, and also just the importance of how everyone has a part in this work, and just the idea of partnering with parents. Like that's the key. Like it's so important. So I just wanted to say thank you for this, and I'll certainly look through it as well and share, any other feedback too. But it's just valuable to have that, because you have to engage different people differently in this work. So I wanted to say thank you for that. And then also just along this conversation of consent, and a lot of times what we tell students and parents when we've spoken with parents is that exactly what we're saying, like consent is not just about sex, and that's a big part of it. But if you can't respect boundaries or vocalize your boundaries in the small things, there's no way you're going to be able to do that when it comes to romantic relationships or sex or intimacy. So that's kind of how we've shared that with parents, and that starts big conversations about their own upbringing or things in their own lives that they were like, oh wow, I didn't even realize that, when you break it down simply in that way. And another big thing that we do when we talk with parents is we talk about having a culture of conversation, and like that whole thing about it starts when they're young and little, and transferring that and continue to have that culture of conversation. It's not just the talk or like having those awkward initiations of conversations. It's creating a culture.
Right.
So, yeah, I just wanted to share that.
So I love that, Catherine. I'm so glad you weighed in. And like I said, this is the first of many conversations that I hope we'll have. And, you've always been such, a good, please, when you look at the tools, please give us feedback.
Yes.
Because like I said, we'll do this in advance of Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. We'll do it in advance of Father's Day next year, as sort of a reminder. And so there's lots of time to sort of refine the messaging. Multiple messages from multiple messengers is community organizing 101. It's also what the public health model and the public health approach would tell us if we want to change a social problem the way we want to, change and resolve gender-based violence. It's got to be from lots and lots of different places. So I just have some content that I want to share with you, and I want to go through the conversation starters. And Russ, I see your hand is up.
Okay, just real quickly, Catherine, if I can be so informal, my apologies, y'all. I grew up in the South. I don't have permission to go call people out your first name without permission. So, pardon my formality. But
no, that's okay.
Your point around using this as a way to engage mind, that is somewhat strategic, right? We designed this toolkits to engage dads, understanding that a lot of dads, this is the entree point.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we can engage them as fathers in their fathering role, and then they get engaged, and maybe then they can be mobilized as men who happen to be fathers in the broader work in our communities.
Yeah.
Maybe if we do our work well with dads of elementary school and middle school, maybe by the time their sons and daughters are in in high school, maybe dads and their teenage children are partnering together to organize within their neighborhoods to help in this on the cultural level. So that is definitely an element of the toolkit as well.
That's great. Yeah, that's the way to do it. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for weighing in. I'm just going to share a little bit about sort of, back to this sort of approach. We've talked about why parents, now we're going to talk about how parents, right? And so when you share a statistic like 1 in 3 teens, that's really, that's a big deal, right? And then when you say, and adding verbal abuse, the rate will go up, that we think that half of the young people who are dating have been verbally abused at one point in time, and really getting parents to sort of understand that and to be observant, to be kind of tuned into what's happening for their kids. Again, we have to be able to share the magnitude and the prevalence. And if I'm sharing anything with you that you want to, if you want to know where it came from, the citations and the research, the study, all of that, please do let me know. I'm going to focus just a little bit on girls right now and female identified folks. We're still trying to do better and better and better when it comes to getting some really solid information around LGBTQ folks, non-binary, kids who are, presenting as gender non-conforming, all of that. But we really, all of the youth risk and behavioral surveys that we are looking at from all across the country are still going to put forth from a self-report that adolescent girls are really at risk. Now, this isn't to say that boys aren't, but this is why we're still doing this very gendered approach, because the problem of intimate partner violence is still gendered. We have not eliminated the root causes yet. So anyway, there were other things associated. Remember I said, that risky behavior, other things associated with experiencing physical dating violence or coercion and control. More at risk for using alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana than their counterparts who had not experienced dating violence, the sexual, what we consider high-risk sexual behaviors, not being able to navigate or negotiate when they're having sex, with whom they're having sex, when and where. And also, of course, we know that sabotaging birth control and sabotaging anything that would help them to have safer sex is something that often happens when we look at this age group, 16 to 24, highest risk, right? And then we've got depression and suicidal ideation, which is, again, twice the rate of other girls their age when we know that they've experienced dating violence. So
and
more context.
Lorien,
yes,
I just wanted to pop in just so that anyone on the phone is seeing our chats as well. This might have been to a couple bullet points before, but Russ said, adding to the conversation that most teens are abused in their dating relationships by other teens. So we're also raising the adolescents who are abusing adolescents.
Oh, absolutely. This is what we're saying, right? These are adolescents abusing other adolescents. But then, when we also look at the problem of older individuals in relationships, grooming young people to be in relationships with them, where there's coercion and abuse and controlling behaviors too. So thanks so much. And thank you, Kayla, for letting us know. Let's get back in touch. I do really appreciate this. Lots of people having to go. So I do want to just say, as people are leaving, please look at the conversation starters and get back to us about how you're feeling about them. So without further ado, let me do that. Let me share those resources with those of you who are still here. Okay, thank you, Keegan, for sharing that again. And we'll be sharing also the conversation starters. We really want to make sure that we're sharing the conversation starters with everybody, and they're on the main page now too. So I am going to just forward, sorry about this. I wish I knew the exact, there it is. Okay, so introductions and tips. So we have some guidance. There's guidance, you know, before the conversation starters. There's guidance on the website in both the parent section of our prevention toolkit and in the Because We're Dads section, which is you can get to that through the Engaging Men tab. And so, you know, much of this is already on there. There's some scripting. This is our sort of blurb, you know, wondering where to start. You know, it's that approach, that hook. You know, parents and caregivers play this really important role. Maybe you don't feel comfortable talking about this with your children. And if that's true, check this out, because this might be able to help you kind of get comfortable with it. So more tips for getting started, not to jump into the heavy stuff, you know, sort of just get in the habit of sort of checking in, right? You know, what's school like these days? Schools are really different for young people these days. You know, how has COVID changed the way that they're interacting? You know, so many dating relationships are impacted by that. You know, how do young people, you know, how are they meeting and how are they hanging out, and are they masked and are they distanced, and, you know, classes look different, lunch period looks different, all of that. And so kind of starting out with these questions that really don't have to do with intimate relationships yet, like what's the subject you like? How do you like, oh, you've got some new friends. What made you interested in being, you know, hanging out with those new people? That's great. This is a time to be exploring what, you know, kinds of friendships that you want to have. What do you have in common? You know, all of that as sort of a start. And then just a reminder to parents that if they're asking the question, they also need to be responsive in a way where they're not shutting the conversation down, right? So staying calm, you ask the question, answer questions honestly, let them know they can trust you by being trustworthy. They may not confide in you again if you react, if you ask a question and you get an answer you don't like. So it's really sort of expanding on all of this to have these conversations with parents. Yes, Russ, please.
And I think part of it for me as a parent around being a good listener also means checking that, I don't know what it is, that gene, that parental norm, that trigger in me, that when Kieran has a question or he starts to struggle, I have to have the advice. And how often does he not want my advice? He just wants me to listen. Mm-hmm. So I think part of the tips for, especially around flirting and dating, part of the tip for parents when talking with your kids is notice when you start leaping into give advice and noticing, is that really going to help the conversation right now? Or do I need to bite my tongue and just listen for a little bit longer? Or let the silence be there a little bit longer before sharing my great wisdom and knowledge?
Right. And along with sharing great wisdom and knowledge is also not making it seem like it's an interrogation, like normalizing having these conversations over dinner, over walks, over drives, doing yard work, cooking in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, all that stuff, you know, driving to field hockey. Even, I mean, I've gone so far as to have these conversations with a vehicle full of young people, right? And much to the mortification of my children, but, you know, sometimes it works. So, you know, lots and lots of different ways to do that. Looking at TV, listening to music together, sharing stories. I share, you know, a story about my boyfriend in high school. Once I'd already been with him for about a year, admitted that he'd been driving by my bus stop over and over and over again, sort of to normalize, like catching my eye. He'd really prepped the soil. I mean, I'd been with him for a whole year before I found out that what he basically had done was stalk me. And so those of you who've been doing this work for a long time know that we use movies, we use things that are happening on YouTube and music and all sorts of things to sort of drive a lesson home or to prompt a conversation when Twilight and the books and the movies were such a big deal, we talked about the fact that Edward basically snuck into Bella's room every night and watched her sleep all night long, because vampires don't need to sleep, and what that was. And then, of course, you know, if you're my age and Russ's age, we've got all the 80s movies that have tons of this terrible behavior that we were really raised on, and like was a steady diet of stalking behavior and things like that, or not letting somebody break up with you. You know, how romantic is it when somebody doesn't let them break up with you because they just care about you so much? So all, you know, using things from the world, current events, things that are happening in the sports world, you know, talking about, you know, even talking about the scandals when that is newsworthy, and having that be the jumping off point. So these are the conversation starters. Yes,
Can I
please.
jump in real quick? I think
Of
one of the
course.
things that I'm going to encourage you all is those last two questions, to interrogate those a little bit further. Those are really critical questions, I find. And with youth, what they tend to do with that first question is, how do you know when you're being respected? They tend to answer it by their own kind of feelings. I know I'm respected when I feel that this such or the other. And push them and push parents to go a little bit further around, how do you know that someone is respecting you? It's important to know for your own self when you feel like you're respected and what feelings arise, but also notice, what are they doing that indicates to you that they're being respectful right now? How does he flirt with you? How does she respond to your questions? How do they do what they're doing in a way that's respectful? Those are also good ways for them to start noticing where their yellow and orange flags are. And similarly, people tend to respond to that question of, how do you know you're being respectful? By relying on the other person's actions and behavior.
Mhm.
Again, I want to encourage you all to push a little further. And most of us know, without paying attention, most of us know in our own selves when we're being respectful, or at least when we're trying. We certainly know when we're not being respectful or trying not to be respectful. And I think it's important for us to help develop youth's own knowledge around, how do you know when you're being respectful, regardless of their reaction? Because you know in your own self. You know in your own self when you're trying to respect that woman or that boy, when you're flirting or dating. You know, pay attention to that, because those are really important indicators for them to rely on when things start to get confusing.
Yeah, that's really good advice for parents, good guidance for parents, for sure. Okay, so those are so for every conversation starter with some of these bullets and some of these ideas, prompts, we're calling them, there are actions and talking points that go along with the conversation starters. So, you know, we know that it's not enough just to do education and awareness, that real change. It's sort of, you know, awareness plus action equals change is our mantra. So you're building a lot of awareness with parents, but you're also giving them action items and skill building, same way we do with young people, right? If we're not building their capacity and their skills, then awareness doesn't, it just, you know, we know this from 30, 40 years of doing this work, it's not changing behaviors, which is what we really want, right? Knowledge, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors to change. So for each of these conversation starters, there's at least one page, one tile's worth of actions and talking points. So I'm just very cognizant of the time, and I just want to take you through a few of these. So that one was about healthy relationships. What's a healthy relationship? How do you know? This one is around dating. Hey, you know, it looks like you and your friends are dating. What's that? How's that feeling? What does it look like these days? What are you even calling it? Do you even call it dating anymore? And, you know, if you can have that conversation with them, talking about expectations, talking about boundaries and consent and commitment, all of that can look really good, right? And get you some, you know, some more things to sort of use as a jumping off point. So conversation starters around dating, and then the actions and the talking points again. So here we're saying, like, let's talk about expectations, and let's talk about gendered expectations. Are there different things that boys want that girls don't? Like in terms of making sure that we're really inclusive and accessible with our language, taking our children's leads. What are they, you know, how are they asking us to use different names and pronouns? And that's like a whole other like conversation starter tile, you know, in terms of supporting parents who may have children that are experimenting with their sexuality and their gender identity, but to take their leads and to normalize talking about different orientations, using language that is inclusive, using the language they want us to use about themselves and their friends. So you can see where we're going with this, that there's some ideas that are prompting parents to sort of look on these things differently. Now, this would, all alone, that second bullet might not be all that compelling, and there may even be parents who balk at it, but it's going to come with research about how when we do that, when we honor pronouns, when we honor the names that people want to be referred to, especially our children, that's actually suicide prevention, right? And so it will link to resources that will help expand their knowledge. I'm just looking to see if there's anything in the chat yet. So more dating round 2. What do you think a bad relationship looks like? Have you ever, you know, witnessed people that you know and you like, people in your friendship circle that have been in a bad relationship? What did that look like? Have you worried about your friends? You know, those kinds of things. My 16-year-old, he was an early bloomer. He was dating in like the 6th grade, which was shocking to us all, which really just meant that they were doing their homework on FaceTime together, that kind of thing, or like showing up to band practice early. But now that he's 16, he really is dating, and both of those relationships he ended because the first one, he said, I was putting in all the effort. I said, oh my gosh, I really liked Ella. That's such a shame. You know, I really liked her. So if you ever want to talk about it, you just, you know, feel free to let me know. And he said, yeah, I was putting in all the work. And then the second girlfriend that he's had in this past semester, it was this sort of the same thing, you know. He referred to it as a toxic relationship that he didn't feel like he wanted to stay in, which gave me a prompt to unpack, well, what is it's an overused word now, right? And so all young people are using that word, but what does it mean? So it's also an example of something that we've said in the conversation starters, which is people talk about respect and consent and equality, but what does it mean? You know, and if you can get the young people that you're talking to expand on what those are so that they're not just buzzwords, then you can really go a little bit deeper. And then again, it's the scenarios that are connected to that that really, you know, paint a picture of, again, what respect looks like. You know, you can't just say it's a toxic relationship. That contains a host of behaviors and feelings that really don't get us anywhere in terms of knowing what happened. So yeah, so this is, you know, this is the tile that really talks about expectations. And, you know, hey, are you nervous? And those kinds of things. So, and not every parent is going to be able to do this. That's why we recommend that they, if they're looking at this and they're thinking about doing this, that they adapt the language to be consistent with how they already talk to their kids or the young people in their lives. So again, talking about, like, somebody might say, oh yeah, that was a really abusive relationship. It was a toxic relationship. And we don't know what they mean by that. And so they may have very different definitions, right, of what healthy and unhealthy looks like. So here's, you know, just another sort of action oriented conversation to have, and then making sure that we are connecting people to the programs, all the domestic violence and rape crisis programs in the community. This is something that would probably be really something that you would want to adapt if you were going to use any of this information, that you would adapt so that parents know. Maybe it's a national hotline that has a text feature for young people. Maybe it's, you know, another kind of hotline, or maybe it's your own program. Maybe it's all three. So we're definitely thinking that you might want to adapt that. I'm seeing the time kind of slip away from us. So helping a friend is in here. Lots and lots of ideas. This is too much text, we know. So please let us know if you think that parents would be, or you are overwhelmed with just like how many words are on some of these tiles. We're really trying to balance like how much information is on a tile versus how many are there. Will a parent open up a resource that has 30 of these, even if there's less, you know, text, it's less dense when it comes to the text? Or are they going to feel more comfortable knowing that there's, you know, 15 or 20, you know, and it's really bite-sized? So again, something that we're working on. Would really appreciate your feedback. Here's the one about personal boundaries, that they can be physical and emotional. Inviting them to think about what crosses their boundaries. Most young people have an idea if you can get them to talk about it, if you can get them to talk to you at all. You know, sometimes some days are surlier than others when it comes to adolescence. And then talking about like all feelings are appropriate, but it's how we act on them, right? And actually that's in another tile. But how do you know when playing or teasing crosses a line and is no longer fun? Russ, you were just talking about that. Communicating, so helping them to communicate their personal boundaries, getting them to even think about what they might be. Important to treat people the way they've communicated that they want to be treated. And then Helen, thank you. I really appreciate the feedback about bite-sized infographics. And then something separate that is more in depth. And so I'd love to follow up with you and talk more about what do you think parents can really tolerate in terms of the kind of information that they're handing them. And remember, I'm coming from a place where, you know, much of this was, you know, sort of presented to rooms full of parents in kind of a slide format. You know, this is really designed to be more, you could have them in slides, but they'll also be, there's formats for Instagram, and there's formats for Facebook, and there's, you know, formats for Twitter. And so Jen, because we're running out of time here, Jennifer, do you want to sort of weigh in and talk about how all of these are accessed and the kind of support that we can give to programs if they want to use them? Is Jennifer still with us? Oh, there you are. Yay, hi.
Yes, there's actually a link in the chat box directly to the conversation starters page. On that site, you'll find a number of unbranded graphic material, including social media posts for Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. There are also unbranded presentation slides in a format that you could use in, say, a PowerPoint presentation. And there are going to be a number of handouts that are forthcoming that are going to be designed in a sort of front and back design format that you can self-print or use however you would like, if you wanted to print them out to use directly, or if you'd like to just have them all available in a packet toolkit. There are also some instructions available on the web page as well. All of those files are in zip folders, so it's going to download all of the graphics as individual objects so that it's easy for you to save and have them all to use. And of course, Lorien and myself are available if you have any questions or if there is any other ideas for a different format that you'd like to see these in.
we're not able to print them out this year, but we're excited about a notion of having something that, is a brochure or, or like a 3-ring little binder of laminated cards that somebody could keep in their glove box in the car or stick in their pocket, just something that's really tangible, like physical and tangible. Although, that may be my age speaking, maybe having everything be electronic is fine for parents and for other adults. So but we are excited about sort of exploring all of the different versions of this that we can be putting out in the world. So I see some stuff in the chat. Yeah, so Helen says that you assume that they were social media posts. Exactly. And let's see. So that's peer pressure. I just want to go through just a couple of more. There's peer pressure, action and talking points. Red flags versus green flags. So again, all of you preventionists out there, that I started to do this work when all we talked about was red flags and warning people about what the signs of abuse were. And then, and that was really very much directed towards girls. There were lots and lots of programs that were directed towards girls and women to sort of see an abuser coming, right? And so we talked a lot about red flags, but it wasn't until really the past 10 years that we started to talk about promoting the behaviors, maybe 15 years, promoting the behaviors we want to see adopted. And that's about green flags. So, really having conversations about like what's a behavior that, or a value that contributes to something being healthy and respectful and equitable. So talking about green flags over red flags for sure, but still we want for parents and others to understand what those red flags are. Again, just from personal and professional experience, the number of parents that don't think it's a problem for dating partners to share their passwords for their devices. And then we know the rate of cyberstalking, tethering, using devices to really keep somebody tied to you. Those devices really help to leverage the kind of abusive and controlling behaviors that we're talking about. Even using those devices to send out messages, texts, emails, Instagram posts, Snapchat, all of that. I'm sure there's something else that I'm not thinking about. And pretending to be the person that they're dating. And so we all have stories like that, right? Where somebody has pretended to be the other person and has posted as if they were. So red flags and green flags. And I just want to do one more thing and then just open it up for conversation and then doing a healthy relationships check-in based on those green flags. So again, instead of asking, like sort of leading with the negative, really asking about the positive stuff and observing the positive stuff. Are they able to go out freely with their friends, to do study group, to play sports, to be involved in hobbies that they were always involved in before this dating partner? Do they have privacy? Do they have alone time? Are they still able to maintain their friend group? When they're together, if you're lucky enough to see them together in the same space, how is your child showing up? Are they showing up the same way, the way that you are used to them showing up? So all of this, right? Are they communicating well together? And really letting that be something. So rather than checking in around the red flags, we're sort of checking in around the green flags. And then there's problem solving around aggressive behavior and bullying and all of that. And so we really hope that you will take a look and that you will get back to us. We're considering having a listening session, another listening session like this, where we can have some feedback. And that might just sort of take a little bit of doing because we know it's a very, very busy time of year. But again, very eager. It's an honest request. Please let us know what you think so that we can make this a usable tool.
If I may, Lorien,
Yes,
back to the,
please.
I think one of the areas that is also helpful when talking about red and green flags is how often some of these behaviors are nuanced and subtle. And so, yes, we often talk about kind of green and red flags as the two extremes, but they're also yellow and orange flags. Those behaviors that make you go, either as the person in the relationship or the parent observing. And it's not quite yet that big glaring red flag, but it makes something inside you go, almost creepy, right? So I think that framing of green and or red flags also allows the conversation to talk about what about those behaviors that are sort of kind of in the middle, and how do you pay attention to those? Because the evidence suggests, both in terms of the kids who are victimized and the kids who perpetrate, that if we can catch them when they're yellow flags behaviors, kids who are abusive are much more likely to be accountable, take responsibility, and turn their behaviors around. And the kids who are being abused are much more likely to get out before they're hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can start talking, in addition to these green and red flags, start talking about what are the orange and yellow flags, we're much more likely to start interrupting this earlier before kids get injured.
Right. Russ, I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much for that. All right, we have just 1 minute left, and boy, didn't we think 90 minutes was going to be enough? But we had a really good little conversation in there in the middle. And so just a reminder, this is the first of many conversations. I really appreciate everybody being able to join us today to give us some feedback. Are there last questions or comments from participants before we close this up? Thank you. Thank you, Helen, for being here. I owe you a phone call. Anybody else? Catherine, thank you. Good to know how things are going in Westchester. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you have questions, I'm actually just going to make sure and the other thing, just as an invitation, if you are not already on our prevention listserv, please join us on that, because that is a way that we share information and try to keep a community of practice going across the state so that we can have a more unified voice. So please do all of that. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everybody. Keegan, do you have some wrap up that you want to do, or Russ, is there a last word that you have?
Russ, anything from you?
No, nothing from me. Thanks. Thank you all very much. Glad y'all were here.
Thank you very much for attending, everyone, and thank you to Russ and Lorien.
Thank you. Thank you, Keegan and Jennifer. Thank you so much for all of your hard work on making all of that look pretty.
Indeed.
And really, really grateful to have you be able to do that. Keegan, thank you for producing today, and it's great to have you on board, everybody. So we'll sign off and we'll save the chat in case people have questions or anything that we need to follow up on. More from Because We're Dads initiative and from Russ in the coming months. So thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Be well, be safe. Take care, y'all.